Welcome to the Impactful Leadership Show. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. John Lennon once said, "A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality." Join me as we connect dreams to reality by chatting with innovators from around Washington, D.C. Our show is proudly sponsored by the D.C. chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization. This is the Impactful Leadership Show. Welcome to the Impactful Leadership Show. I'm your host, Greg McDonough, CEO of Blackburn Capital Advisors. Today's guests were the lead investigators targeting Escobar and his organizations. They are the authors of Manhunters, How We Took Down Pablo Escobar. Please welcome Steve Murphy and Javier Pen.
Hey, Greg, thank you for having us on the show.
Me too. Thank you. Good.
It's great to have you both. This is my first podcast with two guests at the same time, so bear with me for any stumbling, but we'll
just
jump.
One of your guests is named Murphy, and you've heard of Murphy's Law, so just be prepared for anything.
That's fantastic. Well, Steve, I'll start off with you. This podcast is around leadership, and my favorite question to ask is, tell me a misconception in leadership.
And keep in mind that Javier and I were both law enforcement for 38 years, so it's much different in a government position, being a public servant versus private industry, as we're learning. Seems like you guys can make decisions a whole lot quicker than you can in the government. But one thing I saw working with the government as people got promoted, a lot of people just seem to think that they all of a sudden became more important than everybody else because they have a new title. And nothing is further from the truth. I mean, in my opinion, and this is all, Murph's opinion here, you have a position as a leader in which you want to gain the trust and respect and the loyalty of those that are working in your shop, right? And so if you come with an attitude, and how does that work? Just because you got promoted and you have a new title, it certainly doesn't make you more important. Now, it does give you different job responsibilities. And as we've all seen, some people are really, really good workers, but they're not good leaders. And a lot of it has to do with that self-importance factor. So I made a whole list of things preparing for today's talk, and that just kept jumping out as number one. You're not more important. You might be the boss. You have different responsibilities, but you're in a position where you can help your people succeed, which is ultimately going to lead to your success.
That's very well said. JP, any thoughts on what Steve just said there?
Yeah, of course. And I agree with Steve 100%. And, like I said, we were government workers. And I just want to point out that Steve and I reached the highest positions in the federal government, senior executive service, where, we were running a lot of people. I ran 3 different divisions, San Francisco, Puerto Rico, Houston, Colombia. At one time, I was the number 2 guy. So I've had a lot of experience. And one of the misconceptions, and I think Steve had it right, but also is that we assume when there's a new boss is that he knows everything. And you know what? That is not correct. And going back, and this is, one of the lessons I learned in trying to be a good boss is that early on in your careers, right, you had bosses. I had some great bosses, and I had some bad bosses that I hated. And I'll be honest. I mean, and one of the things I always remembered as a first-line worker, and you can, as a first-line worker, any corporate type role, government, you know what I'm talking about, right? First line, you're starting off, is that, I always, like, the good bosses were like, man, I want to make them look good. So I'm going to work harder because this boss is, and I learned from the good bosses, and we had some terrible bosses. I mean, there was points, our time, and, I'm sure you too, where you just wanted to, I need to quit this job. I'm sure we've all felt that way. I mean, we don't do it, but you learn the good traits, and then you try to emulate that later on in your career when you're a good boss. So it's a learning experience, but you always start off learning the great techniques that a great boss had. And I go back to, and like I said, you're working harder. And one of the things I'll always remember is that 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 leadership quality where you want to, when you're on top, always you need to also look at the people that are working for you. You need to how could I say, appreciate them,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of different, how do you appreciate them, but it could be as the smallest as a pat in the back. Have you ever seen like a CEO of a major corporation go down from his office, go to one of the workers and just talk to them about something that he did? I mean, that goes a long way. I mean, we can go on and on about leadership qualities, but it's a learning experience, and you learn while you're going up in the food chain how to be a better boss. And I think that is one of the lessons, in leadership.
JP, I'd love to dive into that a little bit further. I mean, talk to us about a little bit more about your journey and how you went from the first line and then learning leadership and then applying that leadership when you reached, that management level. Talk to us about sort of how your journey, your understanding, your learning changed over that time period.
Yes. And you know what? There was a point in my career where I did not want to be a boss. I did not want to be a leader. I was happy doing my not, I don't want to call it grunt work, but that work, the dirty work, the surveillances, and I started off my career in Austin, Texas, and then I volunteered. I did 4 years there, then volunteered for Colombia, and I was always a working agent. And after I left Colombia, after Pablo Escobar gets killed, I get promoted to our basic level of supervision, which is the first line supervisor in Puerto Rico. And, and that's where I learned a lot. I had a task force of different agencies. So I had like 15 people under me. And it's like in a police department, you're the sergeant, you're running that group. In a corporate office, you're, I don't know, just a team leader. I don't know, whatever, term is out there. But so, I learned a lot. And after that group supervisor, I went up to a headquarters position where you're nobody. Our headquarters level is you're there. Steve was there. You're doing a lot of different things, but you're one in a 1,000. Because there's a lot of big bosses. So, and then afterwards, I get promoted and I go back to the number 2 guy in Colombia, and that's where I was leading groups. And it's in our job again that. There's going to be some stressful times. There's a lot of decision making you have to do. There's a lot of calls that come in 2, 3 in the morning where there's a problem situation. You have to deal with problems. You have to deal with people, personalities. And we all know personalities in our job is a main thing out there. Everybody's got a different personality. It's like one boss always said, you're dealing with 1,000, different worlds out there. Every person has their own world, and you have to adjust. But it's making decisions under stressful situations. You have to learn. You have to learn how to make that decision where it's. And you know what? I learned one lesson in leadership, and it was an old retired Vietnam colonel. I always remember what he says, guys. So you got to make that decision. Some people are going to like it. Some don't, but they're looking up to you to guide that ship. You need to be there. And, no names will be mentioned, but Steve and I know some big people out there that never could make a decision. And it's like the paperwork would be, in the desk would be files of paperwork and no decisions were ever made. But anyway, make that decision, take into consideration everything, and like I said, in our job, it's safety is the first decision making. That's our job. We have a saying, we all go home at nighttime. We all go home to our families. That's very important. Some of our people never made it home, which is, we all know that situation. But learning, and again, I go by the people, by the just that little pat on the back. And you know what? When I was a boss, one of the things I loved to do, and I was the big boss. I had 500, 600 people. You know what I would love to do is bring up the agents that are working a case and let them explain it to you. And their supervisor would always try to butt in. I said, no, I want to hear from the guy who's working the case. And if you look at their face, look at their eyes, I mean, they just open up. They are so proud to talk to you about their case. And another leadership quality I learned is, when we'd have something big, you go down to them, congratulate them, out there when they're working. That goes a long way. So that little pat in the back, that appreciation, sometimes we don't do it. And like I said, that goes, a long ways.
That's very well said. Steve, jumping back to what you brought up at the start of our podcast around titles and leadership, can you give me some examples of your past that you can talk about leaders who've come into positions or they thought they were leaders because of their title, and then sort of how they were interpreted by their staff, or like just give us a little bit more meat behind that statement?
Yeah, it's well, as you can imagine, in law enforcement, there's a lot of type A personalities. I've been told I am. I don't think I am, but they say that's an indicator that you are. So I'm not sure if that's true or not. But you see these people come in and they're quick to jump on people. They don't want to listen to anybody. You got to be a good listener to be a good leader. Mm-hmm. You have your team and you're working towards a common goal, especially in private business. So if they don't know what that is, if they don't know what that ultimate goal is, what you're trying to accomplish, how can they help you accomplish the mission, right? So you see these young guys come in and all of a sudden they're the boss, and they like to let you know they're the boss. And there's an old saying, and I'm a country boy from the South, and the saying is, if you have to toot your own horn, it's not worth tooting. So if you're in there having to tell everybody you're the boss, they know that. You don't need to tell them that. They know who the boss. Everybody knows who the boss is. So I'll give you an example. When we were in Medellin, Javier and I were living there and with Colombian National Police and chasing Pablo and all that stuff. And our ambassador brought in our U.S. Army's Delta Force and the U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6, and they worked with us hand in hand for 18 months. And Javier and I, we always tell everybody, if we're ever kidnapped, that's who we want to come and save us, because we've seen what their capabilities are. They're fantastic. I mean, I refer to them as the studs of the world. I just have the utmost respect for those guys. But they would rotate in, and I think there were 60-day rotations. And so their new boss rotated in on site, and he came and got me one day in the barracks, and he's like, okay, I'm Joe Smith. I can't remember what his name was, but he says, I'm Joe Smith, Captain Promotable. And I thought, is that your name? Your last name's Promotable? And he thought I was being a smart aleck, and I wasn't. I just didn't know the military terminology. And he was still a lieutenant, but he wanted you to know he was going to be promoted to captain. And that just really rubbed me wrong. And then he started telling me what my job was. And, I'm thinking, you got like 2 days here in country, and, we live here, and Javier knew what our job was. And he's telling me how I'm going to do things. And finally, just kind of had to set the guy straight and say, look, I'm going to do my job the way that I've always done it. My partner, the way DEA does it. You're in charge of my safety. If we're being overrun here in the base and we have to bug out, and you have your escape routes and your pre-plan meeting points, stuff like that, I said, I'll beat you there, because I'm going to be scared. And I can run really fast when I'm scared. But other than that, I'll let you know what's going on, but don't expect me to come and ask permission. So that was kind of and I hate to put the guys down, because we do have the utmost respect for these operators. They are the best in the world. But one thing that always came to mind with a leader for me is praise in public, chastise in private. So like Javier was saying, just by you getting up from your little office, we have nice corner offices with windows and all that kind of stuff, and going out in the pods where your workers are. And these are the people that are going to make you or break you. These are the people you're expecting to do their job and be loyal and respectful to you. And I mean, just going out and saying good morning once or twice a day, or the afternoon, or, hey, how's your family? Hey, your kid was playing ball. What was the outcome of the game? Simple things like walking through the areas and picking up a piece of trash in the floor. It's amazing how your workers will pick up on that. And then they turn around and do the same thing. And one last example, I know I'm getting off topic just a tad, but I think these are important. I had been in a meeting one day, and I came back to my office, which was off site, and I had 1,000 things on my mind. And I usually came with a smile and spoke to everybody. If I, doesn't matter who you are, if you're my boss or you're the person they're cleaning our office, I'll speak to you. And I wasn't thinking, and I walked in and I didn't look at anybody. I went straight to my office, and it wasn't 10 minutes before one of my group supervisors comes in and, "Hey boss, everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's good, man. I'm, got a lot of things to do here." And he said, "You okay? Is there something wrong?" And I'm like, "No, it's good. That's good. Why are you asking me these questions?" And well, everybody noticed when you walked in, you didn't have a smile on your face. You didn't speak to anybody. Just want to make sure you're okay. And that, I tell you what, that made me feel so good, that your people care about you like that. And so, from that point on, I always put that smile on. Even if you're having a bad day, even if you just got your butt chewed out, you come walking in with a smile. Don't let that drift down to your workers.
That's so important, and
Right.
a great tidbit of information.
Right.
JP, Steve.
And if I can add something
please.
around that, and this was, and like I said, no names are going to be mentioned. Steve will know what I'm talking about. But during our time in Medellin, right, Steve and I were living there with the Colombian National Police at the famous search block, Bloque de Búsqueda, day and night, searching for Pablo Escobar, doing all sorts of operations, and we're frontline workers. We're no bosses. Anyway, we were there 18 months, living with sometimes we couldn't even go home. We had to stay there, but supervision, leadership, one of our frontline supervisors never came by to see us in Medellin. Can you believe that? Our supervisor. And here we are doing all sorts of, our friends are getting killed, searching, and this is what not to do. This is a lesson in our first line supervisor. This is another leadership, never came by. Hey, how y'all doing? What can we do to make it better? Anyway, no names will be mentioned, but again, this is a negative in a leader. I just
Absolutely.
have to get that off. Yeah.
JP, I was just following up on that. Steve had mentioned, and you mentioned it as well, about listening and being a good listener as a leader. Can you talk to us a little bit more about using active listening as a tool in leadership?
Yes. Oh, that is one of the basic tools. Listening to the people that are working for you. Why? Because they know what's going on. They know, and you could take this into any corporate level in the banking system. You got analysts out there that are working, that know what's going on. They're the ones who, like I said, tell the bosses. And if you do not listen, you're going to be missing out. You do not know what's going on. And just a little, I like to use examples, and not that, trying to toot my own horn, like Steve said, but there was an analyst in Medellin, and his boss did not listen to him. It was a colonel, and this analyst had great information on a serious narco trafficker, a sicario, an assassin in the United States. And the colonel said, Javier, he don't know what he's talking about. And this guy was a young analyst, they had just hired him. Did not, and the colonel says, Javier, let's get out of here. Don't listen to this. He's brand new. He don't know what to talk about. And the information he had, like I said, it was, sir, I think one of Pablo Escobar's main sicarios is in the United States, sicario. And we knew who he was. And he was a deadly sicario, had been responsible for placing a bomb on a commercial airline in Colombia, killing 107 innocent people. So anyway, we leave, and I go back at nighttime. Everybody's gone, and the analyst is still up. I said, hey, kid, a young guy, and first of all, Steve and I we love analysts. They do a great job. And, there's sometimes the unsung hero. So I listened to him, and he gave me information. That information later on led to the arrest of one of Pablo Escobar's main sicarios in the United States, just by listening to them. Because like I said, bosses sometimes make that mistake, of not listening. and our principle is you need to listen because they're the ones who are working it. They're the ones who know. And if, like you said, they have that wealth of information.
That's fantastic. Steve, I'm curious, as we're talking about active listening and the benefits, any techniques that you've used or how you've practiced active listening that you could share with our audience?
Absolutely. There's and I don't mean for any of this to sound like we're coming across bragging, but I just want to tell a story. It seemed like my forte in DEA was being able to work in multi-agency environments. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of type A's, a lot of competition in law enforcement. There's a lot of territorialism. There's a lot of self-preservation. It's my case. I can't tell you about it because then you'll know as much as I do. So, and there's a lot of animosity between state and local agencies and federal agencies. And Javier and I were both local police officers and then became federal agencies. So we were very familiar with that. And we were able to always have that in the back of your mind so that you could not combat it, but maybe alleviate that competition. And so I implemented a program as a group supervisor, which is a first line supervisor in DEA. My policy was no secrets. Now, I'm not talking about classified material. I'm talking about what are the objectives of our investigations. Because if you want the people working with you to do the job, you got to tell them what the job is, don't you? I mean, you got to tell them what is the ultimate objective here. And so once I got out of headquarters and now I'm at the second level supervisor, what we call an assistant agent, special agent in charge, I went to Atlanta and created this strike force, part of the Department of Justice, and had all the agencies in there. I had FBI, ATF, IRS, a lot of state and locals, customs, a couple DEA groups. And there's no more competition than in my first line, in my executive staff, major competition, big egos, big personalities. And every Tuesday, and I'm not an advocate of having a meeting to plan a meeting. I mean, meetings get carried away in the government. It's ridiculous. And that's a whole nother topic. But every Tuesday morning, we would come in for a 1 hour meeting. It was me with my executive staff, and each of those supervisors had to tell everybody else at the table what their group was working on, what area of town, what the cartel relation is, what's the objective of their investigation. And what it does is it cuts down on duplication of effort, which no business wants that. You're wasting resources if you do that. And in our world, it cut down on potential blue on blue situations where you might have cops investigating cops and end up in a shootout, with friendly fire. We've all experienced that kind of stuff. But also what it does now is once everybody knew what everybody else was doing, I would insist on them giving their people an opportunity to do their job. I'm telling you what I want here in the strike force. I'm telling you what I want in whatever office we're in. Now, go tell me how I can help you do your job, but go do your job. I will not micromanage you. I'll give you an opportunity to do your job. If you don't do it, now we're going to come back in and have a discussion. But give people an opportunity to do their job. 80% of the people that are out there, if you've earned their trust and respect and their loyalty, especially their loyalty, they'll bend over backwards, just like Javier said. You always wanted to make the boss happy, right? Now, that other 20%, 10%, this is Murph's opinion here, 10% you can motivate. You can, just by showing respect to them and giving them an opportunity, they'll step up. Now you got 90% of your workforce working towards that common goal. And that last 10%, my experience has been, you might get a little motivation out of them. Those people, you could ask them to come to the office one day a week, come in at 10, take lunch at 12, come back at 1 and go home at 2, and they still can't get it done. So, and maybe that's, it's a testament to my leadership skills that they weren't as good as I would like them to have been, that you couldn't motivate 100% of the people. But we are finding out in private industry after our government service that it's a whole lot easier to motivate those people or get rid of those people if they don't do their job. In the government, you can't get rid of anybody. But I know that's a lot of explanation, but that was my motto: no secrets. And in fact, you can see this bronze eagle back here, and that was from the office in Atlanta when I left the strike force and went to Washington, D.C. the first time. And the inscription on it, in quotes, is "no secrets." That was my policy. Put it out there on the table and let's all get the job done.
Fantastic. JP, I'm curious, just feeding off of that, now that the both of you have seen a lot of corporate America with what you do, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Any other connections or realizations, like things that have come into your awareness comparing corporate life to government life?
Yeah, and you know what? We're all striving for that successful goal, whether it be business, corporate, law enforcement, and that successful goal is going to mean something different to anybody. Banking system could be, hey, boss, I brought in this, multi-million-dollar account into the bank, right? DEA, law enforcement agency, are successful. We arrested one of the biggest traffickers operating in the world. So everybody's got their goals to meet. And you know what, that's why I've always felt that as leaders, you align yourself with great people, because in the end, and I think Steve and I have been both saying that, they're going to make you look good. And that's what, our end goal is in corporate, government, is those good people. And you know what? We're going to have bad people out there too. People that just want to make a paycheck, that come in, put their feet on the desk. Good example is when Steve and I arrived in Colombia. It was the attitude from some of our people down there was like, hey, don't work with the cops because they're all dirty. So what does that mean? Stay at the office, make a paycheck, and go home. So we quickly, we changed it. And you know what? We learned we had a great boss in Colombia, a guy by the name of Joe Talk, who was one of those type bosses that you wanted him to look good, but he would, if you weren't working, he would tell you. And he's the one who I think changed our office atmosphere by going out, talking to our counterparts, doing stuff. So that means a lot, that person out there. But you, like you said, you have to try. But I always remember, hey, don't go out. Those cops are all dirty. So what do? You just stay in the office like any other business. If, you just want to make a paycheck and go home at the end of the day.
Shifting gears slightly and getting deeper into your story, gentlemen, I've got this saying about, life tends to be a random walk until you look backwards, and then it's a straight line because everything just sort of makes sense. At what point in time during your career and chasing Escobar and the things that you were accomplishing, did you realize it was going to turn into being a best-selling author, a Netflix series, et cetera, et cetera? Was there a point in time that you said, you know what, this is going to be a great story for us to tell at some point in time? Now, Steve, I'll start with you.
You're not going to believe this, but we were the complete opposite throughout our entire careers. I will say, once I came back from Colombia after Escobar was dead and all that, I didn't feel like I needed to prove myself to anybody anymore. And for me, that's when being a criminal investigator really got to be a lot of fun. So the rest of my career, there's ups and downs, peaks and valleys like everybody has. But towards the end of our career, I had a friend in Washington, D.C. that introduced me to two Hollywood producers, and Javier was living, I think you were boss down in Houston at the time, right,
Yeah,
JP?
right.
And so I went and met the guys, and I'd tell them a little bit about the story, show them pictures, and both of them wanted to take our story and make political statements out of it. Mm-hmm. And we're about as apolitical as anybody you're ever going to meet. I mean, we make fun of both sides of the aisle, but just because they're such easy targets, right? And so in March or in February of 2013, I got a call from a retired Marine that Javier and I used to work with down in Colombia. Hadn't seen the guy in over 20 years, and catching up a little bit. And I said, well, Gil, his name was Gil Macklin. I said, Gil, why are you calling? Are you in town? You want to go grab dinner or a beer or whatever? And he said, no, I live here in DC. He said, but there's a Hollywood producer wants to talk to you and Javier about the Escobar story. And I said, you know what, Gil, we've been down this road before. You get your hopes up, your hopes get dashed. It's very disappointing. And we just decided nobody really cares. So we're not interested. And I don't know how many Marines but they can be a little colorful in their language when they don't get what they want. So after he tuned me up on the phone, I said, okay, I'll call the guy, and the guy's name was Eric Newman, who was the originator, creator, and executive producer of the Narcos series on Netflix. And so I told, as I'm talking to Eric at the end of the conversation, he said, what do you think? And I said, well, you know what? Thank you for the offer, but we're not interested. And I know he about fell out of his chair because we've since learned that people will sell their souls to be on TV, And so he says, listen, I'm coming to Washington next month. He said, would you have dinner with me and a couple of writers? We're up there on other business. And, let's just give you our spiel. And if you say no, it's no. And I've been keeping Javier up to speed on everything. And honestly, I thought, you know what? This is going to be a free dinner at a really nice restaurant. Yes, I will meet you. That's a leadership decision right there. Free meal, right?
Right.
Free's always good. So met him and I can be somewhat of a practical joker, and I was, and our personalities clicked. And so after that meeting, this was in March, I called, he said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, let me talk to Javier and we'll get back to you. And so Javier and I decided, okay, we'll pursue it. Now, in the federal government, mandatory retirement age is 57 in law enforcement. We were both 56, turning 57 later that year. Because of our positions, the DEA administrator had offered us both a 3-year extension, and I had 2 daughters in college. I needed a job. So we had already accepted that 3-year extension. Well, I called Eric back and I said, look, we're interested. What's the next steps? And he says, we need to get a contract together. That was March. By May, we had signed contracts with Netflix. And in June, the end of June, I pulled the pin and retired after 38 years in law enforcement, which I never wanted to leave. But I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree, but I recognize an opportunity when I see it. And then Javier, I think you made it to the end of the year or early next year and pulled the pin. But by July, we were sitting in Hollywood in the writer's room starting to write the first season of Narcos. So it's the last thing we ever thought is we would be doing a TV series, a worldwide speaking tour, writing a book, all the things, running a podcast, talking to Greg here, coming to the entrepreneurs organizations where we met you in DC, several months ago. Just the last thing. And even after they finished season 1, we were in Hollywood and we were in Eric Newman's office, as a matter of fact, Santa Monica. And he has a viewing room. He said, hey, you guys want to see, the first episode? We said, sure, because he's got a popcorn machine. He's got the booze bar and all that stuff in there. And so we go in and sit in these big leather chairs. And now they had not done the final editing. They hadn't added the music. They hadn't added the colorization, all the things that Hollywood does to make the films look so good. And we're sitting there and we've made it through about 20 minutes. And we both looked at each other and said, this sucks. Nobody's going to like this. Nobody's going to watch this. And we told Eric, hey, we'll see you later. We're heading back to the hotel. We thought it was going to be a flop. Shows you how much we know about Hollywood, right?
That's wonderful. JP, I'd love your insights too. Like when Steve called that next time for that meeting, what was your reaction? I mean, it sounds like you guys went through this a couple of times with some other producers. But when this last time with the Netflix opportunity, what was your reaction when Steve called and said, hey, I'm having this dinner with this producer?
Yeah. And you know what? In our job, in our careers, a lot of it has been timing, right? It's a lot of it is timing. Mm-hmm. Like I said, with Netflix, we're getting close to retiring. And once we retired, they approached us. We didn't approach them. And you know what? We're police. We're not Hollywood people. So we learned a lot, very, very quick. And one of the things is when we went up there, man, we took our own, we had a lot of personal notes from Colombia. So we're telling them hey, the old, just the facts, ma'am, give me the facts. We're telling them all the facts. And then all of a sudden is when, because they would send us the script, right? And I always remember the first script they sent us, what? That never happened? And I'm calling Steve and we're all pissed off, come on. So we did not know, you know what? I learned right away what artistic license means. So, you know what? And I tell people it's the Netflix did a great job. The what do we call it? The timeline is correct. A lot of other stuff is artistic licenses, but it's a great show. And like Steve and I had said, no one's going to watch it. Before we knew it, it had a worldwide appeal. And that's why, you know what, they bought a second season, which was good for us. But it was people all over the world were watching it or loving it. So it just, we were, you know, Hollywood wrong. And in going back, when you first asked Steve about, you know, back then, did we ever think of this as being a Hollywood story? Of course not. You know, and I always remember one of the colonels, I was having coffee one night with him at our search block. He says, Javier, one of those days, someone's going to make a movie of all this. I said, Colonel, who would want to make a movie about Pablo Escobar? You know, basically, I told him, I was laughing. You're crazy. No one cares, you know. And so that was, you know, and then all of a sudden, and you know what? At the beginning, documentaries were done, but there was never that type of interest. And you know what? We Steve and I developed a little, you know, our presentation, but we would tell DEA people how we did it, because also for us, it was a model how we followed, how to take down an organization. So, I mean, you know, not bragging, but we developed a strategy that was based also in the United States, in Colombia. In, you know, that model is being used now when we go after a lot of the cartels. Basically, you go after everybody, you just not go after one person. So I'm proud that we, you know, some of our leadership model is still being used out there.
It's amazing work for sure. So switching gears a little bit, gentlemen, what are you doing now? Steve, you mentioned speaking tours, the Entrepreneurs Organization. Give the audience a little insight what two of you are doing these days.
Well, this is, we're coming up on the end of our 7th year of what our agent calls a worldwide speaking tour. Of course, COVID killed us like it did everybody else. We had a little bit over 80% reduction in business. But the 4 years prior to COVID, we averaged 75 shows a year around the world. This year, 2022, it's come back somewhat, maybe 20, 25 events we've done so far this year, and we're already booking events for next year. So that's a lot of fun because, you know, I mean, just quite honestly, to be blunt about it, we get to travel the world and somebody else pays for it, which is a blast. But we also have our book is still out, Manhunters, How We Took Down Pablo Escobar. We're running a podcast, True Crime Weekly podcast now called Game of Crimes, which you can find anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's on all the different podcast channels. And it's every show we feature a guest. It's not us telling somebody's story. We bring them on and let them tell their story. And it's everything from law enforcement professionals who have been wounded in the line of duty to we had Ed Davis, who was the commissioner of the Boston Police during the Boston Marathon bombing, to Dave Reichert, who was the lead investigator on the Green River serial murder case where a guy pled guilty to 49 murders. We even occasionally bring on a former bad guy, just to get his perspective and let people learn from it. We're the lead investigators on another project called The Lost Clipper, and which involves the disappearance and murder of 15 Americans in 1938 in Micronesia on the other side of the world. And our theory, if we can ever prove it to be true, and us being the investigators, we work with several other guys on the team. The theory is that it was directly connected to the disappearance of Amelia Earhart in 1937, which is still a mystery. What else? We're working on several documentaries now. I don't know how many documentaries you can do on Pablo Escobar, but we're doing more. And currently we have 2 or 3 offers about potential new crime shows or you know, some kind of show on television series in which we might be the host of the show. So you know, it's funny because my wife says, when you're going to, or if you ask my wife when I'm going to retire, she'll tell you when he dies. I'm loving it. I'm having a blast. Get to meet people like you, Greg, and your whole group up there in DC. We had a fantastic time with you guys that time. And it's just amazing the opportunities that come along your way.
Wonderful. JP, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. And we're particularly proud of that presentation we do, which Greg, I think y'all heard it at the EO, right? And we've done 3 or 4 other EOs, but you know, as you know, we tell the truth about the rise and fall of Pablo Escobar from our eyes. We were there, we saw it, we have our own photos, videos. So it's a fun fun in that, presentation, and that, we'll make some jokes also, but it's also a dark time because, well, all the people that Pablo Escobar killed. So we encourage people, please, if you need to hear the real story, hey, please contact us.
Wonderful. Go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
I just have one other thought. And this is something I've tried to teach my kids and anybody else that'll listen to my little pontifications here. Whatever it is in life that we all choose to do, we make the decision to be a leader or to be a follower. We chose to be leaders. You've chosen to be a leader. Why would you want to be a follower? Why would you want to let somebody else tell you what to do all of your life when you have an opportunity to lead the pack? So just think about it. Not everybody is a leader. Maybe I'm a poor leader. I very well could have been. But to me, it just seems like it makes so much more sense for you to step up, take the responsibility, and be a leader. Give it a shot. If it doesn't work for you, then you can go back to being a follower. But man, be a leader.
Yeah. Treat people right, and they're going to look out for you.
That's very well said. And Steve, I won't let my children hear that message until they're at least 16 or 17 or 18. Right now, they need to follow me in my direction.
Well, I have to say some of my kids listened and some of my kids didn't.
It's all part of their journey.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, it's been great having you on the show, and it's awesome to reconnect.
It's been a true honor for us, Greg. Thank you for the opportunity. I hope we're paths cross again. Kind of hoping we might see you in South Africa next year. You never know.
Oh, that would be fantastic. And your bios and your LinkedIn profiles and all the ways to get in touch with you will be part of our show notes. So anyone who's listening, just scroll down and you can figure out ways to learn more about the amazing story and the leadership journey that these gentlemen have been on. So thank you again for your time.
And that's a wrap, my friends. Thank you for spending your time with me. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at impactfulleadershipshow.com. One last food for thought. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone.